The Age of Jackson is the next giant periodization in U.S. history. Um, I think it's a nice way to shift from the age of the founding fathers and the first five presidency into this time period where Andrew Jackson um, is president, and you have these major changes happening. Because in some ways, the founding fathers are pretty much gone by the time he's president, or at least their influence in Washington is not as prevalent anymore. So some of the big shifts that we're going to see that happened in Jackson that you're reading about in your textbook is first of all, probably the most infamous aspect of Jackson's presidency is the Indian Removal Act. More broken treaties that occur there. Make sure to check out the video. Slavery expands. So one of the big things that happened is the expansion of technology because of the Industrial Revolution, and so with the cotton gin, um, the South becomes more entrenched in developing slavery, so especially internal slavery, so just perpetuating this system. But in relation to that, you do have the abolitionist movement rise up, and what really helps the abolitionist movement are the slave narratives written by people like Frederick Douglass, who was a former slave and is able to kind of articulate just how ugly um, slavery really is. Finally, you have the growth of Irish immigration. Some of it has to do with the English colonization of Ireland itself and the continual problems between those two countries. But Takagi has a very good chapter in detailing um, this giant immigration of people from Ireland and the struggle they have. And he'll argue that if you look at the big groups of labor, that's oftentimes the Irish trying to place themselves in relationship to other migrants, particularly the Chinese Americans, which we'll talk about next time. All right. So as I mentioned, Andrew Jackson is like the first non-founding father as a president. He succeeds from John Quincy Adams, who is here in this picture down here. There he is. That's the son of John Adams. John Quincy Adams was involved in the with the other presidents, Madison, Monroe, number four, number five, and then was Secretary of State. So he's a shoe-in to become president. Really bright guy, well seasoned, in Washington. Here comes this outsider, Andrew Jackson, who is this war general, Indian Native American fighter. He's known for these battles you'll see in some of the videos of fighting against Native Americans. Kind of how he makes his name. The big event that makes his name though is about New Orleans, which happens at the tail end of the War of 1812. And in fact, the war was already over when he decided where this fight happened. Unfortunately, back then they didn't have cell phones, so like, no one could text Jackson like, "Hey, war's over, stop fighting." And so he wins this great victory against the British about New Orleans, and so he is going to use that to kind of catapult himself into a political career. He is, however, in the election of 1824, this kind of ends the era of good feelings when basically you had the Federalist Party has kind of died off, and all there is basically a one party system in Washington, more or less. Jackson's run for the White House will inevitably lead to two new parties and a lot of dissension in Washington. So like, people who are like either pro Jackson or anti Jackson. In some ways, you could say this is similar to what the previous Trump administration was like in some ways, where you have this kind of outsider come in, and people, there is no kind of middle of the road for a lot of people, either love him or hate him, and that's kind of how Jackson was regarded. It's funny because President Trump also did have Jackson's portrait in the White House, so there was a kind of even a connection he noticed. Anyways, why was a corrupt bargain in the 1844 election was that he basically won the election. So the election went between four different guys. Jackson was a top vote getter, with John Quincy Adams as the second highest up. So it's going to be a runoff between those two. The other two guys dropped out, but the one guy, Henry Clay, who is the I believe he was Speaker of the House, decided to make a deal with John Quincy Adams and said, I will sway the vote towards you if you make me Secretary of State. And so that's what happened. People who are pro-Jackson felt that the election was stolen from him. And basically Jackson then planned the next 4 years to run against John Quincy Adams again. The election of 1828 got very personal. Jackson's wife actually died during this time period, and he blamed her death. It's a huge story, but he blamed her death on John Quincy Adams and his political opponents. So yeah, it got very personal, and Jackson came into the White House as the first outsider to ever become president. A lot of this, why is Jackson's presidency? What does it mean? Why is it such a big deal? In some ways, it is. He's the first president to actually be the common man, quote unquote, to become president. The self-made man. So he actually wasn't born as like a Virginian, aristocracy like most of the founding fathers. Instead, he was somebody who was, born as a nobody in the frontier. Became president. Is one of the first presidents to really wear his military career on his shoulder. This is a time period where where suffrage opens up more to non-propertied white men, more or less. So this is the people of the frontier, farmers in the South, and so they tended to really like Jackson. And in this kind of tumultuous time period between people who were pro or anti-Jackson, with the help of his vice president Martin Van Buren, the Jacksonian wing of American politics becomes the Democratic Party. In relation to that, Henry Clay, the guy who never was president, always wanted to be, and was part of that corrupt bargain with John Quincy Adams, he helps lead the Whigs in protest. So now you have the Democrats and the Whigs. And the Whigs will last as far as the Republican Party, about right before the Civil War, because, we'll see. Now, Jackson comes in with the so-called kitchen cabinet. Basically, he has a bunch of outsiders who are part of the White House administration. He fires a lot of them. Again, this is something similar to President Trump recently, where a lot of his cabinet is fired in the first couple of years. And so kitchen cabinet just means that there's kind of this revolving door of people working for Jackson. He's also known as the time period of the spoil system, where, this is something that's very, just part of politics, but people that did well for him, especially for his campaigns, oftentimes then were rewarded with positions, or family members of friends were with positions. And so this is the so-called spoil system, where people are rewarded for their help. Jackson's also important. His first vice president, John Calhoun, was actually part of this push by South Carolina of nullification. and Jackson enforced the idea that states had to follow federal laws, even the point of threatening threatening to send the army into South Carolina to not nullify. Um, Moreover, Jackson will end the national bank, which will cause a major economic downturn after his presidency, and that'll lead to the problems for his successor, Martin Van Buren. Um, so this is kind of you can see some of the contemporary political cartoons for Jackson, where they kind of see him really embracing the executive branch as like almost like a king, right? King, it says there, King Andrew the First. Um, Jackson had more vetoes than any president up to this point, and so he really, took charge as a president. And he is kind of one of the first presidents to really own up the power of the executive. He thought, and kind of goes along with this idea of being the voice of the common man. He thought that the executive branch was the most democratic, that he was the voice of the people. And if you look at it, there's a video I posted as well. If you look at it, even the movement against the Native Americans it was generally, in some regard, a popular policy. You're looking at this initial push to go west, or at least to further develop this areas around the 13 colonies and the ones around those, this Louisiana Purchase that Jefferson did. And so, this push against Native Americans was popular with his constituencies. All right, I'm gonna talk about this quickly. Um, these next few slides, you have access to my notes, so you can check out these later. Let me just be real quick. Part of American history is the development of this unique form of, at least this point, a type of Protestant Christianity. And what I mean by that is there are a number of evangelistic movements and very democratic, I guess is the best word I could think of the idea of like of these movements of Christianity that is very popular among the masses and is more masses driven or people driven, less ministers and priests driven. So I mean, these are communities, and you got to think a majority of these people are Protestant Christians, but these are communities that they have nothing else really to do outside of of moving west or to settling in these territories, and so um, part of the attraction was these revival movements of these kind of evangelistic preachers preaching liberty and following Jesus Christ and all that kind of stuff. Really focusing on the conversion experience to God. Um, some would say that the abolitionist movement will branch out of this. A lot of these revivalisms is pushed to like stop to end alcoholism, the development of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So even have these like offsprings of Protestantism that some would consider not really fully Orthodox Christianity, but it's just kind of a smorgasbord, a bunch of different movements, Shakers, Oneida, all these different like movements of religion are just springing all across the United States. In a sense, when in Europe, there's a lot of tension with Christianity and the growing secularism that's happening because of urbanization and the new post Enlightenment ideas. So I think that's really important if you think like why religion is so important to the United States. And this kind of corresponds. I did post this video as well with the intellectual movement transcendentalism in the U.S. And I just point you to the lecture. You can read the two quotes. The main thing is that Thoreau really focuses on our individual experience. And so when he says like, if you really want to know what it means to like live in the world, And thinking about things, you have to focus on the individual.